Hi guys, this is Nancy Miller and I'm here doing a little voiceover over of a speed painting that I'm doing of this little girl and dog that I started. In the previous video I showed you how to do the line drawing, and in this video I'm going over something called value. So value is the lightness or darkness of a color, and it's really important in illustration to have a sense of your values because it really helps you finish it out when you add color. So it can help give it shape and form by adding those values. So in Photoshop, you're going to watch as I do this speed painting of adding the values into this illustration. So it's sped up at about like 900 times so that it would be under 10 minutes long. And so the first thing I'm doing is I've opened up my document and then I'm doing a little bit of a swatch test. And so Photoshop has like set swatches in their swatches panel. So when I do my swatches, I'll go ahead and I'll pick out like the darkest value of black, and then I'll go ahead and do my midtones and then something lighter, and then also I'll have the white of the paper. So usually with the those values, I'm going to mix them together anyways, and I'll get some intermediary values as well. So I'll go ahead and put down like the overall value that I feel like in the little girl's face. So I go ahead and put down like a local value for that part, because even though it's black and white, I mean, there's an overall skin tone main value, and then I'll go back in and add my lights and darks. So to keep things consistent, I'll go ahead and do that same part of the illustration. So if I have to do somebody's face and hands and their arms and legs, I'll go ahead and do that at the same time. I've learned my lesson because in the past I'll get really into the face and then I'll be like, uh-oh, I can't remember. How did I do the arms and how do I get those back to the same values that I had on the face? So the swatches help that I've gone ahead and painted in the upper right hand corner. I also indicated another thing to help me think about the direction of the light. So it's a 2D illustration, and I came up with this little image of this girl and the dog. The dog I had a photo reference. The girl I just went ahead and drew that on my own for my imagination. I mean, I had some images of little girls running and stuff, but then, the lighting was different and things like that. So I like to write the word light, and then I put an arrow kind of reminding me this is the direction that the lighting is coming from, and then I'm a little bit more conscious of it as I'm going in and adding the values. So before the past, I used to think maybe this step wasn't as important, but now it really does help shape your illustration and give it form. So if you're doing illustration that is, I guess even if it's not like more like rendered and it's even flat, it really helps to kind of make you aware of like, oh, I want to have different values so that things aren't all the same value and then it just kind of all blends together. So even if it's flat shapes and then you're just using solid colors, you really do want to kind of think about the overall silhouettes and the values you're using, so it doesn't, like, the background doesn't just mesh with the foreground and the middle ground. So anyway, so I'm going to go in and just start adding more of the values and using my brushes. I'm doing the leash and the little ball. Originally I had a background in there, but I decided not to do it anymore because it just needed more work and things like that. Oh, and then I went ahead and pulled in a reference of the little dog, and I'm just kind of looking at it for overall just kind of how, okay, well, they have some dark patches here. I didn't want to look at it too much because the lighting is different in that compared to the lighting that I have in my illustration. So something that I've realized, because I tend to get really into like rendering things and then I won't pay attention. I've done this so many times. Like if you're using a photographic reference, really just try to get the overall information, just get the information you really need from it, but then be careful of the lighting because, and the values, because it may not be in the same as the way you have it set up in your illustration. So the lighting was different in that photo. So I decided, okay, I'm just going to briefly look at it again just to make sure it didn't have, you know, darker ears or the tail's dark, because yeah, the lighting could be different and then it'll look weird because I've done it before where then you have something in the illustration and lighting looks fine in one part of it, but then you can tell, oh, that person used a different reference or got too into it, and they forgot to make the lighting match. And that's just a newbie mistake, and I have to be consciously careful of it because all I want to do is just get in there and just continue to draw and shade and things like that. But it's really important to be aware of that. So consistent lighting is just a sign of good craftsmanship and contrast in your illustration work. So now I'm going back in, and I did add some texture for the grass. I'm going to finish out, and I found this really cool app called Brushbox. It's really an extension, and I'll put a link in the description box, but I have been looking for something that would organize my brushes because there's nothing beyond like the folders that in Photoshop you have that you can, and you can rename your brushes, but it gets really disorganized because I watch some artists on YouTube, and it amazes me that they can keep their brushes organized and know exactly where they are. But I've amassed, like, I wouldn't be surprised if I have like over 1,000 brushes, and some of them I've made, and some of them I got from Kyle Webster, and some of them I've even bought some brushes before, and you just amass so many Photoshop brushes. So the brush box basically, you install it as an extension, and then it's a fly out panel that's separate, and you can color code all of your brushes. You can, so if you throw them in a folder that you've named, it will automatically pop up with that color. You can move and organize your brushes. You can change the preview and things like that, but I highly recommend that app. Alright, so now I'm going in and painting out the background, and I just tested this out because I was just kind of putting in some light value. This is more like a spot illustration, the way I'm treating it, and I didn't like it. Yeah, you'll see what I try to do to kind of adjust it, and I did some blending, and I still wasn't happy with it. I tried adding some texture to it, using some of the rake brushes that I had. I wasn't really thrilled with that either. So what I ended up doing instead is I had some toned paper. I went ahead and scanned that in, and then I placed it in as the background. So once I added that in, it kind of made it look like I'd drawn on toned paper, and I had to enlarge the paper so it filled the space. But once I did that, there were parts of the girl's face and the dog that I'd been relying on the white of the canvas to show through. So now what I'm doing is I'm just going to go back in, and I'm making the shapes basically using the pen tool, and I'm making the shapes for the arms, the face, parts of the dog, and then when I make these custom paths and I save them in my paths panel, I can make that selection, and I just hold my control key, and then I'll go ahead and left click on the actual little thumbnail, the little preview of the path, and it makes that selection. And then I throw up a new layer, and then I go ahead and fill that with white just where I need it. And then she pops back out now, her skin tones and things like that. And I had to do it on the dog. I did it on the little ball, but that one I think I just used a regular brush and then painted it with some white underneath it. Now I'm just kind of cleaning up the edges. I wanted to try seeing whether I liked having it kind of floating and looking like it was just kind of a blurred edges, and I didn't like that, so then I went ahead and cropped it in. And I filled in the rest of the texture for the grass. And I like that a lot better. I thought that worked a little bit better. Now I'm just going to go back in, make sure, outline the dog. I have this inking brush that I've been using lately and I really liked it. You get some really nice texture. It's supposed to be like kind of like a Chinese brush. And I'm going back in and adding my lights to make the girl pop. And that's it. Thanks for watching.